Welcome to Chapter 14, Shaping Culture in Values. So, culture is something that is not talked about a lot, but is vitally important to organizational successes. And so, when you think about culture, it's really like the character or personality of an organization. It's kind of like, what does it feel like when I walk into the organization? If I visit one of their stores, what is the vibe, right? So, if you think of ExxonMobil, an oil company that is very driven by profit. When you walk into the front doors there, it is probably very rigid. People in suits, very serious, time is money type of attitude. Like you walk in there and you realize, okay, this is about making money. This is about ensuring the shareholders are happy, about maximizing profits, right? In sharp contrast, if you walked into Zappos and do the shoes, you're going to get a feeling of fun, right? There might be some pizza boxes lying around, some old coffee containers, people walking around in running shoes, jeans and t-shirts type thing. Both companies are highly profitable, but the cultures are much different. So let's jump in, see what we're going to cover in this chapter. So the first one is you have to understand why shaping culture is a vital function of leadership. It is your job as the leader to shape the culture in the organization. Recognize the characteristics of a responsive as opposed to a resistant culture, right? You've probably been working in different companies that might have different types of characteristics when it comes to culture. Know how to establish high performance culture by paying attention to both values and the results. Understand and apply how leaders shape the culture and values through ceremonies, stories, symbols, language, selection, and the socialization of daily actions. Identify the cultural values associated with adaptability, achievement, involvement, and consistency, and the environmental conditions as associated with each. And finally, act as a value-based leader and instill a healthy value in the organizational culture and apply the principles of spiritual leadership to help people find a deeper life meaning and a sense of membership through work. That's a great objective, the last one, right? And if you could achieve this as a manager, as a leader, you can't help but having a highly successful organization. Okay, let's jump in. So what exactly is culture? Culture is defined in your textbook as a set of key values, assumptions, understandings, and norms that is shared by members of the organization, and it's taught to new members as they come in. They're like, this is how things are done here, right? At Zappos, we aren't going to wear a three-piece suit. We're going to wear a t-shirt and jeans, and we offer you free pizza at lunch, right? Where the culture at Exxon is much more rigid, much more formal. And what are norms? Norms are shared standards that define what behaviors are acceptable and desirable within a group, right? So this is, at Exxon, you show up at the meeting on time, you bring your notebook, you're taking notes. There's very high level of accountability. The communication system is very top down, very structured. In Zappos, the norms is a little bit more laid back, right? So the norms are the standards that create a culture. Okay, I love this. This iceberg analogy is used so much for all sorts of different things. And so this is essentially what corporate culture looks like. On the top of the iceberg, we have things that are visible, such as the way that people dress, the way the office is laid out, what slogans, what ceremonies, what things do we celebrate, culture that can be seen at the surface level. The majority of culture in an organization is invisible, right? Below that waterline. And these are things that are expressed values. The HP way, which is one of their slogans, right? underlying assumptions and deep beliefs such as people here care about one another. These are deeper values and shared understandings held by the organizational members that maybe the general public doesn't see. Maybe if you visit an organization, you don't see it. And maybe when you're beginning to work at an organization, you don't see these things. But they are embedded. They are the bedrock. They make up the vast majority of the corporate culture, right? These invisible things that are held beliefs that you may not see emblazoned on a wall in a mission statement, for example. Okay, why is culture important? It integrates members so that they know how to relate to one another, right? It establishes the norms in an organization. So when you show up to work every day, you say, okay, this is how I need to behave. This is how I need to dress. This is how we interact with one another. It helps the organization adapt to external environment, right? The fact that you can go somewhere that is familiar, that you have routines, you have procedures, you have a culture, it makes you feel very comfortable. And this is also true if you think about your personal life. Think about it for a second. If you are spending time with people within your culture, when you're eating the same food, you're talking the same language, maybe you believe in the same God, it is very comfortable. On the other hand, when you go to a culture that is different, and I think most of you have had an opportunity to at least spend time with people from a different culture, if not visit it, it feels a little strange. It feels a little awkward. And the more different the culture is than your culture, the more awkward it becomes. So this is why a culture is so important, right? It gives people kind of roots to feel like they're part of a family, and this is how things are done within this family. So internal integration. So these are a couple things it does. So culture is being used for internal integration, meaning that it really helps assimilate people to an organization. It helps develop a collective identity, helps members work together efficiently, guides day-to-day working relationships, and determines how people communicate within an organization. You can imagine how hard it would be working in an organization where these types of things are not ironed out, where there's not an established culture. You really don't know what your job is every day, and it's hard to get your footing. Additionally, it helps people determine what behavior is acceptable and helps people to determine how power and status are allocated, right? Like, who do I need to go to for what decisions? Do I have the power to make that type of decision? Are other people in different roles have influence on how I behave and what I do? It really helps you get your footing and understand how the organization ticks, because as we know, every organization is different, and the ones with the strongest culture are the easiest ones to work in. Not saying that the work is easy, but at least it's easy to figure out what the expectations are and how to meet those expectations. So, external adaptation. Culture determines how to meet goals and deal with outsiders. It helps you respond rapidly to customer needs and the moves of a competitor, right? Like, and I'll give you an example of Costco has a great return policy. And so if a customer comes in and something isn't working, the culture there is take care of the customer. The customer is number one, no matter what it is. It helps you respond to customers, right? Encourages you encourages employee commitment to the core purpose of the organization, determines what is needed to meet external challenges, and embodies the values and assumptions needed to succeed. Cultural strength, the degree of agreement among employees about the importance of specific values and the ways of doing things. So there's a lot to unpack in that statement. So cultural strength is really the degree to which employees feel like the values of an organization are important, right? If you know that, again, we'll go back to Zappos, showing up, being in a great mood, treating people with respect and dignity, being happy and laid back and not taking things too seriously is really important in their culture. And if you come in and you act differently and you start to treat people in maybe a disrespectful way and you put money before people, that's not going to work out for you, right? So the stronger the culture, the more people agree with these values, right? Everyone is on the same page. Everyone is heading in the same direction. A weak culture, on the other hand, has people disagreeing and maybe saying, oh, I don't know if I agree with the way this organization is running. And I don't know if I really think these values are important. And I don't know if we're really doing everything in the proper way. I would do it differently. That's a sign of a weak culture. Okay, this is so important. Responsiveness versus resistant cultures. So in some cultures, people are very responsive, right? If we want to make a change, if we say who's on the same page here, everyone is very good. Resistant is people who are in an organization and they don't like any change. Maybe they don't like the culture. And here is a breakdown, the left-hand column and the right-hand column, of how it manifests itself within the organization. So if you have a responsive culture, leaders pay attention to all stakeholders, they initiate change when needed, they serve the legitimate interests of the customers, right? The express values are the leader genuinely cares about customers, they care about employees, they value all the people, and the underlying assumption is you serve the organization as a whole and you trust others, okay? That paints a picture of a responsive culture. Conversely, on the other hand, a resistant culture, in this type of culture, managers tend to be inward looking and politically motivated, right? That they don't want the goals to change. They want the environment to stay the same. In this type of organizations, managers care mainly about their own interests, about the products, about the technology, and people are put on the back burner. They're not seen as important. In this type of culture, the underlying assumption is meet your own needs. Everyone out for themselves. Distrust others, right? I don't know what organization you'd rather work in, but I myself would much rather be in a responsive organization, right? One where people are all on the same page. We're all in there together, that we're here for the organization and that we trust one another. But not all of them are shaped the same way. And it's your job as a leader to create a responsive culture. So cultural gap is the difference between desired and actual values and behavior, right? So we all know there's organizations, maybe you've worked for one where they say, we're here for the customer, the customer's number one. And then you see a whole bunch of examples in which maybe the customer is not put first, in which maybe the customer is not respected, maybe they're not honored. This is called a cultural gap. It is the difference between what the desired culture is and what is actually happening on the ground. Combining culture and performance. Okay, so we have attention to business performance and attention to values. Those are the two axes here. And we want to live in quadrant B because quadrant B has high performance and high cultural values. That is the green box in the top right-hand corner. In this corner, leaders achieve performance goals and uphold desired cultural values. The reason you want to live there is because not only are you achieving the goals that are set for you, right? All the benchmarks, all the targets for profit, all of the customers that you want to help, but you're doing it in a way that aligns with the cultures and values of the organization, right? In contrast, the opposite end of the spectrum is quadrant C, low performance and low cultural values. Leaders do not meet performance goals and leaders are not upholding the values. I think in that type of situation, the leader's not going to have a job for very long, right? And then quadrant A and quadrant D are missing one of the two important elements, right? In quadrant A, although they're hitting the performance goals, they're not valuing the culture. And in quadrant D, the culture's intact, everybody's happy that way, but they're not hitting their performance goals. So you want to live in quadrant B. That's what you want to do as a leader. This is what makes leadership such a challenge. Not only do you need to achieve the performance goals, but you need to do it in a way that honors and upholds the culture of the organization. So, high performance culture, a culture that is based on a solid mission, embodies shared and responsive values that guide decisions and encourages individual ownership of both bottom line results and cultural values. This is quadrant B, right? This is what we just talked about, quadrant B right here. This is defined as a high performance culture where you are honoring both the bottom line results and the cultural values. What is a cultural leader? A cultural leader actively uses signals and symbols to influence corporate culture. Simple as that. What does cultural leadership look like? Cultural leaders influence the culture. They articulate a vision for an organizational culture that employees believe in, right? We've talked about this in previous chapters. They motivate, they inspire, they lead the culture. They heed the day-to-day activities that reinforce cultural vision. They put time and energy into ensuring that the culture is being taken care of, not only the results. And they don't sacrifice the culture to achieve results, right? And you can see this. You can see it in an organization where maybe it's a culture to respect everybody, but then you put people down when they don't, meet the performance objectives that they're set out to do. That's not really honoring the culture of an organization. Mechanisms that enact cultural values. So what mechanisms or kind of levers can you use to enact cultural values, to, create them, to enrich them? The first one is rites and ceremonies. Like, what do you celebrate? When you have awards at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, what are the things that you celebrate as an organization? What stories do you tell? Is it the number of sales that someone made? Is it the way that they came through for a customer? Is it how they revolutionized a technology? What are the stories that you tell? What are the symbols that people uphold as an objective? What specialized language do you use? The HP way is an example, right? Selection and socialization. How do you select the employees who are going to work with you, right? If you have certain values in an organization, you want to go and select employees who share those values. How do you socialize them? How do you welcome them into your community, into your organization? And what are your daily actions? What do you show up? What do you do every single day that is going to demonstrate the culture? So let's jump into these in a bit more detail. So what is a ceremony? And it's a planned activity that makes up a special event and is generally conducted for the benefit of the audience, right? And say we look at an organization that is heavily reliant on sales, and at the end of the quarter they have a celebration about who made the most sales, right? That's a way to continue to create a culture that values sales. So what does a ceremony do? It reinforces specific values, creates a bond amongst employees, and celebrates employees who symbolize important achievements. Ceremonies are often accompanied by the presentation of awards, like the example I just gave. What are stories? And a story is a narrative based on a true event that is repeated frequently and shared amongst the employees, right? It's used to illustrate the company's primary values and may not be supported by facts, but is consistent with the values and the beliefs of an organization. So there's a department store in the US, I forget the name right now, but there was a book written about the culture It'll probably come to me after I finish the lecture. But anyways, they were known to always meet the customers' needs. And one of the stories was that they came in and they wanted a certain product, but that store didn't sell that product. So what the employee did is they went across the street and they bought it from a competitor and then sold it to the person coming in to look for it. So that's a great story about going beyond the expectations of customers to make sure they're happy. And listen, it says right here that maybe they're not supported by facts, but they're consistent with the value. And the point of that story is that we really want to come through for the customer, but maybe the way we did that is not 100% true. What are symbols? An object, act, or event that conveys meaning to others. Specialized language is language that can shape or influence an organization, their values and beliefs. Leaders use slogans and sayings to express key corporate values. And you've seen these all over, right? Google is like do no evil or something like that. So this specialized language is used to try to encourage certain behavior. Leaders express and reinforce cultural values through written public statements. Okay, what is socialization? The process by which a person learns the cultural values, norms, and behaviors that enable him or her to fit in within a group, right? That idea of, if you show up the first day to ExxonMobil in sneakers and a t-shirt, it might not go well for you, but you're not going to do it on day two, right? On day two, you're going to show up in very formal attire to align with their organization. And the other thing is true too, right? If you would show up to Zappos all dressed up, everyone else is in t-shirts, the next day you probably dress in a way to fit in. And this has to do with the way you dress, how you conduct yourself, the language you use, and how you behave with one another. Okay, in selection and socialization, I touched on this a little bit before, but companies with healthy cultures have rigorous hiring processes. And the reason they do is they want to make sure people are going to fit in with the organization. Common socialization tools, leaders act as role models, training programs, and rituals. You don't want to be hiring people who don't fit into your culture, because that's going to begin to degrade the quality of your culture. Daily actions, important to maintain the desired culture. Evaluation should include work performance, demonstration of organizational values. So people are now encouraged to honor those values and that culture on a daily basis, and they're evaluated on it, right? You get an evaluation at the end of the quarter or the year, and they say, okay, listen, not only was your performance great, but you also fit into the culture. So we're happy to have you. Here's a raise, and we're going to welcome you back in the new year. Okay, so what are organizational values? So these are enduring beliefs that have worth, merit, and the importance for an organization. So what an organization values really is going to align with their culture, right? Concerns changes the nature of the work, globalization, increasing diversity in the workplace, shifts in larger societies. So as cultural values change in society through globalization, through diversity in workforce, so do the values in an organization. In two dimensions to be assessed: the extent to which the competitive environment requires flexibility and stability, and the extent to which the organization's strategic focus and strength is internal or external. Okay, so Exhibit 14.4 outlines the 4 corporate cultures. According to our textbook in this diagram, there are 4 distinct types of culture, and depending on the organization, you may fit in one of these quadrants or maybe overlap in a couple. And it depends on, do you have an internal focus or an external focus? Are you flexible, or do you want stability, right? Involvement culture, adaptability culture, consistency culture, and achievement culture. Based on your values in the culture, you're going to fit in a different quadrant, right? Consistency culture might be something like a bank. It's very consistent. It's based on the economy. Things are formal. Things are rational. Things are in order. Versus a tech company might have an adaptability culture, right? It's more about creativity, taking risks, experimentation, and being responsive to what's happening in that world. Types of corporate culture. So adaptability culture, like I said, these cultures are characterized by values that support the organization's ability to interpret and translate signals from environment into behavior, right? You're very responsive, like a tech company. Achievement culture is characterized by a clear vision of the organizational goals and the leader's focus on achievement to those specific targets. Involvement culture is a culture with an internal focus on involvement and participation of the employees to meet changing expectations of the internal environment. And achievement culture is a culture with an internal focus and consistency orientation for stability in the environment. Okay, so what are ethics? Ethics is the code of moral principles and values that governs the behavior of a person or a group with respect to what is right and what is wrong. And this is really interesting because we've talked about ExxonMobil versus Zappos. They probably have very different ethics when it comes to how they're going to make money, right? One company might be focused on the bottom line. The other might be focused on environmental sustainability, about doing no harm, about making sure that all the employees along the supply chain are treated fairly, right? Depending on your ethics, it's going to really shape the culture of an organization. Value-based leadership. This is beautiful. An influence relationship between leaders and followers that is based on shared, strongly internalized values that emphasize the common good and are consistently advocated and acted upon by the leader, right? The leader is saying, these are the values of the organization. I will align my behavior with these values no matter how hard it may be. Leaders influence organizational culture. They demonstrate their personal beliefs, generate trust and respect from employees. They practice spiritual leadership. What is spiritual leadership? Values and practices considered as spiritual leadership include integrity, humility, respect, appreciation for the contributions of others, fair treatment, and personal reflection. Beautiful. Don't you want to work for a spiritual leader? Don't you want to be a spiritual leader? Think about how nice it would be to work in an organization that values integrity. They respect you for your contributions. They always treat you fairly, and they reflect on their personal abilities and values to try to get better all the time. Spiritual leadership, the display of values, attitudes, and behaviors necessary to intrinsically motivate oneself and others towards a sense of spiritual expression through the calling and membership. This is how spiritual leadership looks like in a model, right? So on the far left side, we have the leader's values, attitudes, and behaviors, right? What is their vision? And that vision is going to branch down to what effort they make and what rewards they give. Then we're going to move to the followers. These are the people within the organization, right? And what are their needs for spiritual survival? They want a calling. They want to make a difference. They want to live a life of meaning and not just work for an organization for a paycheck. They want their life to mean something. They want membership. They want to be understood and they want to be appreciated. And the outcome is organizational commitment and our productivity, right? So if you are a spiritual leader and you're able to give people a life of meaning, they're going to come through for you, right? They're going to be committed to the organization and they're going to be highly productive. And that is it. That is chapter 14, how to create a culture, the importance of a culture, values, ethics. It's a big topic. Okay, go write the quiz. Hopefully that goes well. If you have any questions about any of this material, as always, don't hesitate to reach out and ask, and have yourself a great rest of the day.